Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today is a distinguished, celebrated artist of many parts. He's a painter whose exhibitions and exhibits have been displayed in galleries around the world. He's a sculptor. He started his career, in a sense, studying at Santiniketan, but that was preceded by a master's degree in Malayali literature. He did his PhD thesis work looking at the murals in Kerala. He taught art education at the Jamia Millia University. He's been a distinguished designer of children's books, more than 50 of them. And he has worked in many, many different art forms. I'm delighted to welcome A. Ramachandran. You sort of not that long ago, said that your paintings were much too expensive for you to own. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think it is much more expensive now. When I said it was less expensive. But that is not the point. The point is you do very few works and there are more people to acquire them. So it is difficult to retain some works for my own family or my own personal collection. But now I think it is high time that I should retain some of the works, not because of its monetary benefits, but I would like to make a public museum of my works, so that a concept of offering your works for the public is not there. It's only for private collectors now.
So in what ways does, in that very important evolving process of the life of an artist before he can really afford to hold on to his own paintings, how does that change the relationship to your work? You create something, there's only really one of it. It's not like a book or even a movie where you can have a number. There's just one real original, and then you have to sort of part with it because you have to, it's livelihood.
Well, I won't say that, because the early part of my career, I hardly sold many works. Many of the works are still with me of the early period. They are difficult to acquire because they are very difficult paintings. But the concept of selling the works and living on painting was not the idea which I followed in my life. The very fact that I took up a job in Jamia Millia was to support myself and my family, because I know I cannot be a freelance artist. Now I am a freelance artist because I have 30 years I was a teacher. And then after only retirement, I had the courage to become a freelance artist. But many of the artists, fellow artists of mine, they were all freelance artists, and they try to live on painting. That is a very painful experience for those artists who are now very well known, and many of them I know them personally. They had a very difficult life.
Was this, in a sense, a compromise for you? We tend to have this very romantic notion of the suffering artist who, in order to paint, will sacrifice. People, sell jewelry, the wife's jewelry, and live in penury so that they can do their painting and create this expression of themselves. Did you feel in some ways compromised that you had to do other things and not just be a painter?
No, to be a painter, like how do you want to be a painter? That's also important. You can do your own work and be free from the difficulties of handling and selling a work. Suppose even if you are dealing with professional galleries, the process of selling an artwork is a little less romantic, I must say, to put it mildly. And then the problem is that the kind of art which I used to do before, they were not that that happy things to own. And so the early period, all my works which I did as a young angry young man, who is all the time critical about what is happening around, But today I have given up all those notions of art. I think art is the kind of an involvement which goes beyond social commentaries. Social.
But beyond the idea of social commentary, how important is the notion of suffering, of experiencing intense emotions necessary to produce great art?
No, I don't think it's not necessary at all.
So that's a romantic notion
Yeah,
about
it's a
suffering.
romantic notion.
That's why, perhaps that, your early work, was more expressionistic. It had elements, certainly, for a lay viewer, and I'm not a very sort of educated appreciator of art, but, had sort of urban images, sort of, personal angst is a word that's been used to do that. And then that evolved into much prettier, finely calibrated kind of work. Was that sort of the aesthete in you? I mean, after all, you've done a lot of designing work, sort of working empirically, designing more than 50 children's books, and as designing postage stamps, a great deal of detailing and working with form and aesthetic, where, in a sense, would it be fair to say that feeling may have taken, have receded somewhat, because we normally tend to feel that feelings of lack, of anxiety, of suffering are more intense than the feelings of joy and when expressed. Is that a fair?
No, it is not. I think these are all ideas good for short stories. But I don't think, like any artist, even people who painted very difficult subjects, like Rajiv Mehrotra, for example. But they are all, the kind of romantic notions you have about artists is not there. An artist is a man who is looking at a blank canvas. And the moment he looks at the blank canvas, the challenge starts. It is not what, even if you paint a flower or a dead body or a very highly provocative kind of political statements, these are all paintings basically. And its merit is only depending on how you have executed it. A Van Gogh's sunflower is far greater than even Guernica, to my mind, because it is not the subject matter, it actually takes you to that kind of a level of looking at a work of art. A work of art transcends the subject matter, and the subject matter is only like a peg to hang on your the whole concept of art. So when you move to that level, the subject matter actually obliterates. Like take for a great abstract painting, there is hardly anything conveys to you.
So you've been you've been sort of an art educator in a sense. You've been teaching art education. Give us a sense of sort of, well, let's start with this thing of looking at the sunflower, and what makes the sunflower a special painting. Do we, as viewers of this painting or your work, when we look at it, do we then begin to see elements that we don't ordinarily notice or see? The painter draws attention to specific elements to it, reveals new character and facets of the subject matter of the painting. What are the kind of elements that
as a teacher, I think I never try to teach art appreciation from that point of view, because verbalization is not the way how you can communicate about a work of art. It's like, you show me a very beautiful girl and say why she is beautiful. Even if I say her nose is very beautiful and her eyes are very beautiful, her shape is very beautiful, but there is something beyond that. A painting is something like that. It is not because Van Gogh used intensity of yellows, of different intensity of yellows, to convey something beyond a sunflower. That motive of a sunflower can take you to a level where that image disappears, and you are, it's like listening to good music. You cannot explain why Mallikarjun Mansur is taking to a point where you forget even the composition he is singing. So it's the kind of sound pattern he has created at that particular point of time. That takes you to that kind of a level of, experience. The same way, when you look at a great painting, yes, first you look at the shape and form and everything, but beyond that, there is a point where you are taken to a different level. That is why I today paint differently from the other modern Indian painters.
You're watching a conversation with the artist, sculptor, A. Ramachandran. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with A. Ramachandran, the painter, philosopher of painting too. You locate, much of your work has been located sort of in response to capturing the tribal community in Rajasthan, and you were just telling me that you've recently been to Rajasthan and again so you try and give us a sense of the process. You'd mentioned looking at this blank canvas. So when you go in and you're looking, what are you looking for when you go into Rajasthan? You're obviously not just looking at the literal images to capture and put on the canvas. There is a process taking place. Try and share. I know it's complex, it's subtle, and which is why you're a painter and I'm not. What is this process that happens?
I think there is a very interesting statement by Picasso. I don't search, I find. So when I go to Rajasthan, I only find things which were there. I think they are very ordinary things, but to me immediately it strikes that these are the elements which can be very important components for a work. This process actually is being taught by Santiniketan teachers, especially Nandalal Bose. He believed that an artist, the structure of the mind of an artist has to have different levels. One level is the response to the nature. That means his raw material should come from nature itself. The second thing is his awareness of the culture, which he is a part of it. Like, suppose you are an Indian, then first you should know about Indian culture and then beyond India, So that is the kind of, you are placing yourself into a location. That is the second part of it. In the third part, then you should transcend all these things and create a great work of art. Now all these three elements have to go together. So the first discipline, if you call it as a Gurukula style, the first discipline is to go to nature itself. That is the first teacher and the great teacher to every great artist in this world.
But isn't there a relationship between somewhere, your cultural conditioning, your dimensions of your growing up? You're a Malayali, you studied Malayali literature, you go to Santiniketan, and you go and you find this in the images in Rajasthan. Is there a, you normally assume that before you transcend the literal images of your conditioning, of your environment, of the collective subconscious that you grow up in, before you transcend that, you capture and look at those aspects. You have said that that the Malayalis, apart from perhaps in cinema, lack a visual culture. Was it something like something on these lines that prompted you that led you into Rajasthan, or was it just an accident?
No, maybe I think your observation is correct. Because Kerala would not have been a place for me to settle down and paint. The kind of, the way the Malayalis understand art is very much of, verbalization. They respond to words very effectively. That's why the literature is so good. But when it comes to visual images, unfortunately, last 100 years or something, after the British established the art schools and things like that, we have also developed a kind of a phobia, for any kind of stylized work of art. You are in a hurry to get a painting, conveyed to you. The simple and straightforward, the better for you. As if you are in a great hurry to catch a bus, before that you want to get the appreciation, in a small packet. So that is the way they look at a work of art. Or impatiently they will look at a painting for 5 minutes and ask you, Acha, tell me what is this supposed to be. Now, this is not at all the way you should look at a painting. Nobody asks these questions. If you are a serious, art connoisseur, you never ask such questions. You look at the painting. If you are unable to comprehend in the beginning, the more you look at it, one day it is going to open up for you. That kind of an effort is not there on the part of Malayalis. And second thing is, of course, the tremendous impact of Raja Ravi Verma paintings on the public. Raja Ravi Verma was a great artist of his period. I don't deny that. But then it was a period, and that time maybe a kind of an European influence was necessary to our visual culture. But there it ends. But we can't go back to that period. It's as good as saying you'd like to read only Charles Dickens all the time. I won't even compare with Charles Dickens. That is too much of a comparison. But even then, that whatever the quality he had is not because the paintings are of great level as a work of art, but it is because of the thematic content. Like people identified with the gods and goddesses and the scenes from Puranas and all these things. But they were not actually great paintings. If I compare him with Gemini Roy or or Nandalal Bose or something like that, I still think Ravi Verma is a much lesser painter in caliber. So my coming from Kerala, as you wanted to know, I was that, like even as a child, I have written it, I revolted against this kind of a realism. And even in those days, by looking at the modern review volumes, edited by Ramanand Chatterjee, had the reproductions of Bengal school artists. And I was quite familiar with those, the works of Abanindranath and Nandalal Bose and all other, great painters of Bengal. And there I could identify, because it was not just a visual translation of what you see. It was for something beyond that. And then also it reminded me of something of the Indian tradition, what you call it. But the actual formation of a proper perspective towards art came only when I went to Santiniketan. There the environment was so different. There were great copies done of Ajanta, Bagh caves by Nandalal Bose and his students. And there were also great wall paintings done by Binod Bihari Mukherjee, Nandalal Bose, and there were great sculptures of Ram Kinkar everywhere. So it was, it's like as if I have gone to heaven. There, whatever I wanted, what I wanted to be, I could immediately identify to that environment.
But how did all this this exposure, this internal processing, come to rest, not exclusively but substantially, in the tribal images from Rajasthan, where, as you said, that you didn't go looking, but you found. So what was the connection with the inner you in terms of what you wanted to express, or what you were seeking, from the subtle, in a sense, to the gross, the subtle interior to, and I hate to use the word gross, but let's say the concretized, the locked-in image. What was there in Rajasthan and these tribal images?
Well, that I think it must be due to my teacher, Ram Kinkar, for example. He painted only all his life, whatever his sculpture or painting he did, they were all based on Sandal's life. And I was also, as a student, like my teacher, I used to go to Sandal villages and study them. You see, when you go to such people, one, you lose your inhibitions of a educated man, as a city, bred person and things like that. You go to a village where you see actually what India is. It's much more simple, more transparent, and the images are very extremely healthy, not in the sense of poverty, of course.
So robust,
there,
in a
yeah.
sense, yeah.
But they are the people who work. They are part of the nature. The whole body is tuned to work in that reality. The trees and plants and birds and insects.
More elemental, perhaps.
Yeah, everything is actually integrated into their life. So it's not a compartmentalization of our life in a metro. But we have also, when you look back to the tradition, in our Indian painting, man was not the dominant, what you call it, image. It's only in the European art man becomes dominant. Even Krishna and Radha in a painting, there are many other elements which goes into making of that painting. To me, that is very fascinating. India, we never thought the man as the ultimate, power, like a Michelangelo's image or something like that. Yes, Krishna was a very powerful, personality, but when he's painted, he's also part of the, the cowards and what you call it, he merges with the landscape and the trees, and his activities are actually around, that kind of a landscape. He doesn't look like a superhuman being there, That gives a different life to those paintings, Actually, you must have known Gita Govinda series, painted by all these great, miniature artists. Whether it is in Pahadi miniatures or in Rajasthan, they also adapt the locale, the costumes and the landscape and the architecture of the places integrated into it. So Krishna doesn't become a myth; he's a living character. So why? Because they molded their images from the living, the life which they observed. The same thing happens to me when I go to Rajasthan. I am looking at these people and I understand they are ordinary people who are working, they, for their daily bread, and also they have festivals and they have at night they have this little bhajans, worshipping Ramdev and things like that. All these activities I found, it's like looking at life in a very, very small fragment of life. But that fragment of life gives you much more intensity than looking at
captures the microcosm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So so that's why I said political things doesn't interest me anymore, and I don't want to respond to any of the things happening around me. People call me an escapist. Maybe I am.
We'll come right back to that in a moment. You're watching a conversation with the artist, sculptor, A. Ramachandran. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with my very special guest, A. Ramachandran. You were talking about how in Western art, man is in a sense the center, and not that much in our traditions. And you've been talking extensively about the spirituality, about the elemental, about how the microcosm captures the macrocosm. When you paint, what is the balance between this process of or is there, of surrender to a process and yet controlling it? How is the balance? What precedes it? What is the synergy between the two?
I think it is very difficult for a painter to explain the process of it. In fact, it's quite a mysterious way. If you ask me how does it happen, I don't know. Because sometimes it may be starting with a concept, sometimes it may be starting with an image, sometimes you may not have anything. You just take the chalk or the brush and you start drawing or sketching, but it just grows. So there is like when I said the spirituality, spirituality is a search to the unknown. You don't know. If you know, then you won't search. So a painting is a search, So
and do you find it when the painting is complete and takes shape? It's got locked in. Is there a finding, or it just leads to the next painting?
It leads to the next painting, because it never stops. When I finish a painting and I enjoy it only for a day, then I lose interest in it because I have to go to the next work already. And I don't even display them in my house because I don't like to see them. I allow the other people to see it, but I don't want to see them because it's a kind of an inhibition. I do not repeat. If you have looked at my whole, the series of works, I really don't have another painting of the same. Subject matter may be there, or the images, but it changes totally. But recently, what is happening is that like in the 70s and 80s and 90s, I was more concerned with the images, how the form takes place. I have fairly a good drawing, I suppose. I don't know. You can ask other people. But that drawing, the way of sketching from nature, for almost 40 years now, is like a enormous amount of materials. I have more than, I think, 15,000 drawings I have from 1954 to today. All these drawings, I go back and look at them and try to rework and recapture the same thing again and again. These are my raw materials. But now, like, yes, I start drawing an image and things like that. But beyond that, when I take one color, that is the end of it. Then I don't know. That one color decides what are the other colors to take place. And then it goes into a kind of a logical order. And sometimes you make a mistake, and that mistake is fatal for you. Because one color can change the complete spirit of the work, and then you get frustrated.
And then you go back and redo it, and you don't compromise on that, on the present.
You can't go back, but you know that you have lost your way. So you leave the painting as it is. There are many paintings where I have lost way. I won't say that it's all paintings have lost the way, if you ask me. Because the next painting I find, maybe I'll find the proper way. But the proper way doesn't come. Because this is an endless process. So like every musician will think, I will sing Yaman Kalyan better. But every time he will sing, he will think maybe next concert I will sing much better. It never happens. It is for the listeners to decide whether my performance is good or bad.
Hey, Ramachandran, thank you very much. This has been a great blessing and a great honor.
Very much.
Thank you very much. It's been quite wonderful.